Water is one of planet Earth's most valuable resources. Without clean water, we couldn't survive. But too much of it can also have catastrophic results. As you know, our reporters travel up and down the African landscape to find new and important environmental issues. And this week, many of them are linked to water. I am Chris Elems, and I send you a warm welcome from Lagos, Nigeria.
Thank you, Chris. I am Sandra Twinovideo here in Kampala, Uganda, and it is nice to have you with us again. So sit down and relax for the next half hour and enjoy the following topics on this week's edition. In Kenya, water levels continue to rise in Lake Nakuru with dramatic consequences for the local population. In Ghana, women are finding creative ways to cope with invasive water hyacinths. And in France, marine conservationists have designed an innovative boat that collects plastic waste from waterways. When a mother bird abandons its baby chicks, the chances of survival are slim. And if that happens on a large scale, entire species can be wiped out. Just recently on Robben Island in South Africa, thousands of Cape cormorant chicks were suddenly abandoned, but a bird protection group stepped in to help just in time.
This little cormorant gets an injection of nutrients, slowly building up his strength. He's one of 1,000 young cormorants being nursed back to health by a team of scientists from a South African bird conservation group. Later, the birds will be released back onto the island where they were hatched. Their home is the once infamous prison island Robben Island off the coast of Cape Town. This is where Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison before becoming South Africa's first black president and helping end apartheid. Less well known is that this is home to one of South Africa's largest cormorant colonies. This year, the researchers say around 2,000 cormorant chicks were abandoned by their parents.
So the reasons for the abandonment are always difficult to define. So we do think it is linked to our limited food supply at the moment, so the limited fish stocks in our waters. It was definitely linked to the heat that the birds experienced during those days. So those are obviously things that are very tricky to deal with. It's climate change, it's lack of fish. So it's basically the overall bigger picture of our environment that we struggle with.
According to experts, 80% of the lionfish species on the South African coast are overfished or no longer there. Some months ago, more than half of the young birds could be quickly evacuated to the mainland and cared for. Here in the nursing station, they should learn what they will later need to survive in the wild. Swimming underwater to catch fish, for example. Their preferred diet? Sardines and anchovies. Under artificial sunlight, they also practice drying their feathers. So far, only around 1,200 of the birds evacuated from the island have survived. But they are now ready to be returned to the wild.
So here we're doing the final check before a cormorant gets released into the wild. Most importantly is waterproofing, to see if his feathers are waterproof and the feathers underneath are dry. This guy has some dry feathers on his back, that looks good. Good quality wing feathers. And then we're also looking at how heavy they are. These ones are looking so much better than when they came in. They were really tiny, hungry little chicks that wouldn't have been able to look after themselves, and now they're good to go into the wild.
And now it's time. After more than half a year, the cormorants are going back to the island, their childhood home. In small cages, the birds can acclimatize to their new surroundings and take in the sea air, the smell of fish, and the wind of freedom. But cormorants are not the only birds on the island. Robben Island is officially a seabird diversity hotspot and hosts the third biggest colony of African penguins. Almost 4,000 of them nest here.
We have more than 160 seabird species that have been recorded on site. And maybe the biggest colony that exists on the island is Cape cormorants that we are currently busy rehabilitating, and we're aiming to release them in the next few days.
After almost half a year in the care center, the scientists have to say goodbye to their babies. The birds are left to do what they like. Now the team will know if the young cormorants are really ready for life and freedom. Each bird has been ringed with visible color rings, which allows them to be more easily spotted after release. The situation on Robben Island hasn't changed much. The fishing industry still takes the sardines and anchovies from the birds, and people impinge on their space.
We need to be prepared for future events, so this has been a very important lesson for us to learn, and just getting these birds back out and hopefully putting them back into the breeding population will help the overall population to remain stable.
Since the 1970s, the Cape cormorant's population has halved, and the IUCN states that this trend shows no signs of reversing. So each rescued bird is vital to the species.
Wouldn't it be great if this rescue initiative resulted in a new generation of Cape cormorants on Robben Island? But sadly, human interventions in nature aren't always successful.
That's right, Sandra. Sometimes they do more harm than good. The water hyacinth is an aquatic plant from the Amazon in South America that was brought to West Africa by botanists. The invasive species grows and spreads incredibly fast and has significant negative impact on the ecosystem.
It's harvest time on the Volta River in southern Ghana. These women work for the initiative Global Mamas and are gathering water hyacinths near the town of Akuse. It's a common plant in the region. Global Mamas process the stems into a natural fiber. Florence Atsi-Zokbe now has a reliable income.
We have it here, but we don't know use of it. So when Global Mamas came, they came and teach how we use it. And now we are harvesting it and be selling to them. So after selling it, we get money from them to support our family.
More than 30 local women process several tons of water hyacinths a month. The plants are invasive and highly problematic, especially for fishermen. Here on Lake Victoria, its dense foliage creates a sort of floating mat that makes it hard for boats to move through the water. The fishermen catch has fallen dramatically. In Potsdam, in Germany, Michael Burkhardt has spent years researching invasive species like water hyacinths and studying their impact on the water ecosystem.
When most of the sunlight is absorbed on the surface, then much less reaches into the depths. That leads to a big reduction in algae growth. And so there are no available nutrients at the very start of the food chain.
There are no water hyacinths on display here because they are no longer allowed to be grown in the European Union. In Africa, where they've expanded massively, efforts are underway to find new solutions to combat the invasive species.
There are two types of weevil that eat water hyacinths and breed on their leaves. So they were introduced in problem areas in Africa as a way of reducing the plant's spread. But before you do something like that, you have to be absolutely sure that they won't choose other African aquatic plants over water hyacinths and start eating them instead.
In most regions, the plants still have to be harvested manually, ideally before their growth has spiraled out of control. Global Mamas only process a fraction of the water hyacinths harvested from the Volta River, but at least they have found a constructive use for this invasive and highly challenging species.
Time for another report about the threat to our waters. Plastic is putting marine life in peril. Every year, over 10 million tons of plastic waste are dumped in our oceans. In this week's Doing Your Bit, we'll take a closer look at one innovative solution.
Clogged canals, polluted water, piles of plastic waste. Across Africa, from Congo to Nigeria, waterways are in a sorry state. Collecting the plastic waste is a challenging task. Sometimes it's downright impossible. The volunteers can't do anything at all about the microplastics in the water. But the sea cleaners can. This marine conservation boat is specially equipped for the job. The new boat, the Mobula 8, is agile and capable of operating in narrow and shallow areas without running aground. During a trial run in Paris, the decontamination boat collected plastic debris and everything else it found in the water.
With this boat, we can store more than 2.4 tons of waste on the deck, on extensions designed specifically for this purpose. We're also able to collect up to 600 liters of liquid waste, such as hydrocarbons.
The waste gets sorted on board, with plastic separated from algae and other organic waste.
The net can be lifted up, and then sorting operators will separate the macroplastic waste from organic matter, such as algae.
The organisation plans to develop a sister vessel and a bigger decontamination boat suitable for the ocean.
And how about you? If you're also doing your bit, tell us about it. Visit our website or send us a tweet. #DoingYourBit. We share your stories.
Well, we all know where all the plastic waste in our oceans come from us. But not all the environmental changes happening in the world can be easily explained.
That is right, Chris, but most of them have to do with the climate crisis, and adapting to these changes can be very challenging. The residents of Kenya's Lake Nakuru district have found this out the hard way.
Lucy Njenga says she used to walk along here when she was living near Lake Nakuru. Now she can only come by boat to the spot where her family's home once stood. Less than 2 years ago, this area was used for farming. Now young men throw out fishing nets here, hoping to catch anything of value. The lake has swallowed up entire buildings and fields, and Lucy Njenga's life was turned upside down.
This used to be our house, but Lake Nakuru kept rising. It all began in 2020. Then in March last year, we had to move out because the water had reached a dangerous level. Suddenly, we were homeless. Before, we raised poultry, but the chickens died in the water. Now I'm penniless. I have nothing left to my name.
In one way, Lake Nakuru is a paradise. It's in a fantastic location in the middle of a national park that's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and is just a 3-hour drive from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. It was always popular with tourists, but for the past 7 years, the lake has grown steadily. The water level is now twice as high. Lucy Njenga and her husband have moved to a hut just 5 or 6 square meters in size.
I'm not the only one whose house has been submerged. My neighbors have suffered the same fate. But in a room this size, you can't cook properly, you can't sleep properly, nothing.
Several hundred others who lived on the banks of Lake Nakuru have had to move to emergency accommodation. This was once the main entrance to the national park. The number of tourists coming has also declined.
This is the original outermost point of the lake shore. And from here it was 100 meters to the actual lake shore. This is the beginning of the woodland. But now it has moved more than 3 kilometers inside.
We joined Joseph Fadebi from the Kenyan Wildlife Service, the state agency responsible for conservation. He's been observing the changing landscape with great concern.
The lake level has gone up by more than 5 meters. Initially the lake level was about 4 meters. But now we measured in December, it was 10 meters. But now the lake level has gone back by half a meter, so it's about 9.5 meters.
It's had serious consequences for the entire park. Roads have had to be relocated. Animals and birds are struggling to find enough food and suitable breeding grounds. That's forced many of the flamingos, for example, to leave. Lake Nakuru is just one of the several lakes in Kenya's Great Rift Valley that have been affected. But what's behind these changes, and could they destabilize the entire ecosystem? Experts are still debating the cause. Environmental activist Elizabeth Wanja believes there's no easy answer.
When we registered the highest levels of water, and it could be attributed to a complex and myriad interface of climate change, land use change, and geological factors, which has resulted to a number of social economic impacts and also hydro and ecological impacts on the lakes.
Back to Lucy Njenga and her husband. They say there's been very heavy rainfall in recent years. Like them, their friend and neighbor Victor Njendu was also forced to relocate. He now lives with his wife and 4 children in a corrugated iron hut that he built himself.
And this house, as you can see, it is very small. When I consider where I was and see where I am, and maybe count of where I would be, then I see it's quite a great loss for me and my entire family.
Victor Njendu struggles on day by day. He does his best for his family, but finds it hard to stay positive. Lake Nakuru continues to shimmer with all its beauty and attract tourists, albeit in smaller numbers. But the entire area has changed. Meanwhile, Lucy Njenga is deeply unhappy. She dreamed of enjoying her retirement by the lake. Now she faces an uncertain future.
The plight of people living on Lake Nakuru is a stark reminder that our way of doing things is reaching its limits. We have to do more to protect the earth and its forests, rivers, the soil, the air, the animals and the plants. And that will require coming up with ways of making and using things without creating waste. Here are some examples from Germany.
Astrid Budsin spends much of her free time thinking about wild plants. That's why she created the game Natur Memo, a memory game that teaches people of all ages about plant life.
I would really like wild plants to be part of our lives again. I'd also like to see them on our menus, because wild plants contain so many important nutrients that are often missing from the cultured vegetables we eat nowadays.
She made sure Natur Memo was produced to a standard called Cradle to Cradle.
That means that things are produced based on the model of the natural world, the circular model of nature. Whenever you've finished with a game, you can either eat it, and it is edible, it's printed using natural plant-based colors, or you can just toss it in the compost, or even in the forest.
But the cradle-to-cradle standard means more than just compostable. It also means that during decomposition, little to nothing is released that could harm the environment. Print house Lokai is the first in Germany that prints to this standard. Ralph Lokai inherited the company from his father and has transformed it into a fully green operation.
Basically, I think it's the responsibility of a company to make sure that its products don't harm the environment. We need to make a profit so that both our staff and the company can make a living. But we're not looking to make a profit at the expense of people and nature.
This means making every step of the process sustainable. The printing machines provide climate control for the building, which uses a water recirculation system. The machines are also CO2 neutral, and the paper and printing colours both carry cradle-to-cradle certification. Making the change from a conventional printing house to a sustainable one was an easy decision for Lokai.
It's not fundamentally much more expensive, but you do need to be willing to reorganize things. Of course, when you rethink production, a lot of things need to be completely overhauled. You need a whole new approach.
This is a challenge facing the entire printing industry. More than half of the paper thrown out worldwide ends up in landfills, and more paper is produced every year. Paper can take up to 20 years to break down, and that process releases CO2 and methane into the atmosphere. Alcohol and other chemicals from the printing process also seep from the paper into the environment. Catapult magazine founder Benjamin Friedrich began printing on a different sort of paper to save trees.
This is the magazine issue where we changed over from normal paper to recycled paper. Here I calculated how many trees were felled with normal paper and on the back with recycled paper. If publishers would simply switch from normal paper to recycled paper, it would be a huge step. It would be so much less damaging to the environment.
It's a viable solution for big publishers. The switch is simple, and Catapult says it costs them less than 1% more to use recycled paper. And if people opted for the same high standards as Astrid Butzin, completely sustainable printed products could become as common as wild plants.
Even the smallest steps move us forward. All of us can do something to help. One woman in Benin, West Africa, believes that these are some of the most important lessons we can all learn.
Exactly. In our next report, we'll meet another Sandra. Sandra Idosu is one of the best-known environmental activists in Benin. She works tirelessly to raise awareness of environmental issues among the general public, and she starts with the younger generation.
For me, children are the true drivers of change. In terms of the environment, it's better to buy things produced here. It reduces the CO2 impact. In Benin, we have a law banning plastic bags. Sandra Idosu is passionate about protecting the environment, and she visits schools to spread the word. Today, she's in the village of Pahu Povi. Food here is often sold in plastic bags. It's something these kids have grown up with. But Idosu explains that crude oil is used to make the bags, and that's bad for both the environment and their health. The campaign Sachet Elue, or blasted bags, serves as a reminder. We should avoid using plastic bags, but if you do use one, you have to say Sachet Elue. It's better not to use them at all. They cause too many diseases. It's the kids who spread the message by encouraging their communities and friends and families to adopt responsible behavior. Here, Idosu is helping a group of volunteers warm up and get ready for an eco-run in Cotonou. The aim is to collect as much plastic trash as possible along the route. Hundreds have participated in the roughly 20 such events held in Benin so far. And they talk with people they meet about the campaign, which has been well received. I think it's a great initiative. It's a way of making a contribution to the city and to show that Cotonou is important to us. 3 years ago, Idosu founded an organization called Engagement Action Socially. In addition to the cleanup events, they managed to get a petition against plastic bags through Parliament. Since the law has been approved, we now have to sensitize the population and explain to them why bags are dangerous for their health and the environment, and especially to be a force behind the government to enforce this law. The activist is good at raising public awareness of an issue. She's a successful businesswoman with expertise in marketing. She also owns a shop that sells items made by recycling artists and local craftspeople. Here we specialize in objects and artworks made from raffia, woven loincloth, local wood, cowrie shells. Handcrafted products tend to be environmentally friendly. We can recover things found in nature and transform them to give them a second life. This shop, Couleurs d'Afrique, is simply a continuation in the fight for a clean and healthy environment. We have what we need. It can be done. Sandra Idosu is tireless in her mission. Nearly everything she does is aimed at making Benin a cleaner and healthier place.
That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Echo Africa and that we've given you something to think about. See you again next time. I am Chris Alems, signing off from Lagos, Nigeria.
Thank you, Chris. All the best to you and our viewers. Do not forget to check us out on our social media platforms. Let us stay in touch. I am Sandra Twinobudio here in Kampala, Uganda, and I look forward to seeing you again, having your company again next week.